Hi, I'm Don Ferguson, the producer of Florida Keys Dive Odyssey, the video series that unveils the actual GPS coordinates of the top dive sites in the Florida Keys. In the last episode of Keys Dive Guide, we explored the reefs near Tavernier Creek. Today we're leaving Tavernier Creek, moving northbound on the Overseas Highway through Key Largo, the dive capital of the world. Our destination is just up the road in Key Largo Harbor, also known as Port Largo, around mile marker 100 on the Overseas Highway. After launching into the Port Largo Canal, it's a short idle until we hit open water. Here's an overview of today's dive itinerary, covering 8 nautical miles or 9 1/4 statute miles of reef line. Let's head directly for the red number 2, Key Largo Harbor head pin. From here, it's about 6 miles south to our first target, Pickles Reef. Pickles is served by 3 mooring buoys and marked by 2 spars, all that remains of an 1848 Davy. She's one of my favorite reefs. The first target on Pickles, the so-called Pickle Barrel Wreck, is situated near the northernmost mooring buoy and is named for the dozens of barrel-shaped objects in 8 to 15 feet of water. The barrel-shaped objects are actually hardened concrete, leading shipwreck historian Dennis Trelowitz to theorize that this is the remains of the SS Thornley, a British side steamer bound from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Tampico, Mexico, carrying a load of building supplies. The SS Thornley sank on November 1st, 1898, near Pickles Reef, according to the Admiralty records in Key West. However, keep in mind that from 1829 until 1912, there were over 30 documented shipwrecks in the Pickles Reef area, which extended for 4 miles past present-day Molasses Reef, as can be seen on this 1868 navigation chart. Since nothing to positively identify this wreck has ever been recovered from this site, naming this wreckage the SS Thornley is just an educated guess. In the days before Loran and GPS technology, pinpointing a shipwreck on a reef nearly 6 miles from shore was little more than a guessing game. Whatever her identity, this ship tore into this reef with tremendous force, spreading her iron wreckage out for over 100 yards. There were only a few survivors of the SS Thornley, and no mention of her proximity to the Pickles Day Beacon F, only a few hundred feet away from this wreckage. All 3 mooring buoys on Pickles mark wonderful dive sites. About 1/4 of a mile east of the Pickles spars, we'll find one of the most beautiful and quite possibly the largest stand of pillar coral in the Keys. There is a large sand pocket adjacent to the colony and 22 feet of water in which to anchor. Unlike most corals, pillar coral polyps are extended during the day to catch microscopic organisms that drift by in the current. The extended polyps give the colony a fuzzy appearance. The two northern sand chutes lead down to deep Pickles, an incredible, seldom explored diving treasure in over 100 feet of water. We could dive around here for weeks and never see the same area twice. The next 5 dive sites are shipwrecks located near Molasses Reef, but just outside the Key Largo National Marine Sanctuary. The first 2 wrecks are the twin Coast Guard cutters, USCG Bib and the USCG Dwayne. The Bib is 3/4 of a mile, 185 degrees south-southwest from Molasses Light, while the Dwayne is just over 1 mile, 190 degrees south-southwest from Molasses Light. Mooring buoys are available for both sites, with the buoy eyelets an 8 to 10 foot free dive from the surface. The twins went down as artificial reefs in November 1987. The Bib rests in about 135 feet of water, while the Dwayne is situated in about 125 feet of water. Bib and Dwayne were both 327 feet long and 41 feet wide. Each vessel displaced about 2,650 tons and had twin propellers that pushed them through the water at a top speed of 19 knots or 22 miles per hour. The bells from both of these proud vessels grace the entrance to the Coast Guard station in Islamorada, Florida. The Bib saw action in both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans during the Second World War. She served as the landing operations flagship in the Okinawa campaign, where she withstood over 50 attacks by Japanese bombers, torpedo planes, and kamikazes. Her huge exhaust stack is now forever silent. She also served in Vietnam, rescued over 260 survivors of maritime disasters, and was involved in a number of drug seizures. She now rests on her starboard side, her bow pointing north. The Dwayne was commissioned August 1st, 1936. She helped sink a German submarine during World War II, later served in Vietnam, and was part of the 1980 Mariel boat lift from Cuba to Miami. Her crow's nest can be reached in about 60 feet of water. The Dwayne rests upright, her bow facing southwest. The strong, unpredictable Gulf Stream current can change in intensity during a dive on either of these wrecks, creating a dangerous situation for the unaware. One balmy night, Captain Lance Holmquist and I decided to dive the Dwayne. The current was minimal on our descent, but when we reached the deck of her stern, we noticed a ripping current blasting over the vessel. I sought refuge under the stern, getting a good view of her massive port prop before easing back to the mooring buoy cable line for a careful ascent. By this time, the current was ripping all the way to the surface. Our next target, the sailboat wreck, is located just outside the sanctuary, about 6/10 of a mile, 220 degrees south-southwest from Molasses Light in 55 feet of water. The sailboat wreck is tough to locate. The 55-foot depth makes her difficult to see from the surface, and the uneven bottom makes her difficult to paint on the depth gauge. When the blue water is in, it's easy to spot the large sand pocket 50 yards northwest of the wreckage, a good spot to anchor without damaging the coral. Local fishermen created an unauthorized artificial reef when they scuttled this sailboat in the early 1980s. The area nearby the sailboat wreck is full of ridges and valleys ranging from 45 to 65 feet deep. We're easing over to the Brass Wreck, situated about 0.8 of a mile, 250 degrees west-southwest from Molasses Light in 18 feet of water. This wreckage is from an unknown steam sailing ship that went down in the mid to late 1800s. A large smokestack was recovered on this site and sold for scrap in the early 1970s. Steam sailing ships also had masts to harness the wind with sails, and there is a huge mast close to a large deposit of mangled wreckage. A large, headless Jesus icon is buried in the sand next to the mast, its fingers pointing to its Sacred Heart. As we observe her visible wreckage, it is easy to imagine her exploding into the 18-foot deep ridge and disintegrating for well over 100 yards shoreward into the 22-foot deep valley. It's quite possible that people died when this vessel plowed into these shallows. The next target, the Bronze Pin Wreck, is yet another shipwreck mystery. She's situated in 30 feet of water, about 2 miles, 267 degrees, almost due west from Molasses Light. She was an 80-foot sailing ship, probably from the late 1800s. Even though the Bronze Pin Wreck is the only sandy oval in an endless sea of manatee grass, she's another difficult wreck to spot. Her flattened hull and scattered bits of twisted metal are now a fish nursery. The Bronze Pin is yet another nameless ghost ship, lost in the sands of time in the waters of the Florida Keys. The next dive site, Three Sisters Reef, is close to the Molasses Reef channel markers green number 1, green number 3, and green number 5. This is a nice 20-foot deep offshore patch reef bathed in the waters of Molasses Reef Channel. We're blasting seaward, off to Molasses Reef for a series of dives on the world's most popular dive site. Molasses runs for about a half of a mile and is a classic spur and groove reef system with 28 mooring buoys to accommodate dive boats. Marked by a 45-foot tall, red flashing light tower number 10, built around 1920, Molasses has unlit spars on its northern and southern perimeter and is just inside the lower boundary of the Key Largo National Marine Sanctuary. Our first target, the famous hole in the wall, is about 100 yards seaward of Molasses Light in 20 feet of water. Moving seaward down the adjacent sand pocket, the scattered remains of the winch hole wreck come into view. The bearings from this winch to nearby Tavernier Key and Rodriguez Key nearly match the bearings the captain of the Northampton gave the Admiralty records in Key West when she sank near Pickles Reef on May 24, 1883. The Northampton was built in Bath, Maine in 1852. She displaced 1,073 tons and was bound for Liverpool, England from New Orleans, Louisiana, with a cargo of cotton and wood staves used to make barrels. Here again, this theory is just an educated guess. No positive identification has ever been recovered from this site. The next site of interest is the so-called Spanish anchor in about 15 feet of water. It is rumored that this anchor was recovered near Three Sisters Reef and brought out here to the Fore Reef as a dive attraction in the mid-1950s. Idling into deeper water seaward from the light tower, we're inching to the 3 mooring buoys that represent the Molasses Secondary Reef, a 3-tiered slope which drops from 45 to 115 feet in depth. The mooring buoys are in 35 feet of water, and the 3-tiered drop-off is a 15 to 20 yard swim seaward. Molasses Reef is an outstanding night dive. Every year between 7 and 10 nights after the first full moon in August, the ocean comes alive as the corals spawn on the Florida Keys reef line. Some corals, like brain coral, are hermaphroditic. Its male and female components are both encased in these eggs that drift away to hopefully establish new colonies. During a coral spawning, the waters teem with tiny marine creatures not often seen. Hiding in coral crevices by day, ribbon worms writhe through the dangerous upper levels of the water table. Nearly transparent, millions of pelagic salps and zooplankton are jet-propelled by siphoning water in one end and expelling it out the other. Salps, like many other organisms near the bottom of the food chain, glow at night. This is bioluminescence, the result of several enzymes interacting within these tiny creatures, causing them to emit light. Bioluminescence is used to attract mates for reproduction, to attract other organisms to eat, and as a defense mechanism to confuse predators. The next dive site, Sand Island, is a scant half-mile up the reef line. Marked by 4 mooring buoys, Sand Island is a beautiful alternative to nearby Molasses Reef. The next target, Whitebank Dry Rocks, is an offshore patch reef about a mile due north from Sand Island. Marked by an unlit marker and 7 mooring buoys in 8 to 15 feet of water, these scattered coral heads and turtle grass flats are home to juvenile fish of every description. The furry sea cucumber has suction-equipped podii on its underside that facilitate movement. They survive by creeping along the ocean floor, consuming animal and plant matter. Let's skip over to French Reef, about 1 mile 100 degrees east-southeast from Whitebank. A modern unlit marker with 2 ancient rusting spars marks French. The old spars are the remains of Day Beacon G, one of the first permanent navigation aids in the Florida Keys. In the late 1840s, Lieutenant James Totten of the Army Corps of Engineers supervised the installation of these 36-foot-tall, unlit screw pile day beacons on every major reef in the Upper Keys. A different capital letter and color denoted each reef. French Reef was denoted by the capital letter G. The remains of these 36-foot-tall unlit screw pile day beacons are also clearly visible on Turtle Reef and Pickles Reef. We're inching about 100 yards south of the spars to a pair of heavily encrusted cannon in 10 feet of water. Beautiful French Reef is a wonderful honeycomb of caves, coral canyons, and sand pockets with 17 mooring buoys to accommodate dive boats seaward from the spars. The first target, Hourglass Cave, is near the shoreward end of a long sand pocket beneath the southernmost mooring buoy in 30 feet of water. Near the midpoint of this unusually long cave, this interesting hourglass-shaped pillar divides the cave in two. The scorpion fish blends in with the reef, allowing it to surprise smaller fish that don't recognize it as a predator. Its dorsal fin is poisonous. Notice its beautiful pectoral fins. After exiting Hourglass Cave, divers can see their diffused air bubbles trickling to the surface through the fissures in the coral. Just up the reef, a nearby mooring buoy marks Christmas Tree Cave, named for the gigantic mound of star coral that rises above the cave like a Christmas tree. Christmas Tree Cave is 30 feet deep. Notice the diver ahead of us keeping her fins off the sea bottom. This courtesy allows us good visibility when following her in the cave. About 50 yards up the reef, we'll visit Sand Bottom Cave, an extremely wide cavern in 30 feet of water. Let's skip to the French Trench and Anchors, less than 1 mile up the reef line. The fluke is all that is visible of the first anchor in a sand pocket 50 feet deep. 100 feet to the south, a large iron stock anchor rests in 45 feet of water. A 100 yards to the northwest of the iron stock anchor, the awesome French Trench cascades through water 50 to 55 feet deep. The next target, the MV Benwood, rests in water 35 to 45 feet deep, 3/4 of a mile, 035 degrees north-northeast from the trench and anchors. An unlit spar buoy and 8 mooring buoys mark the remains of this World War II casualty. The historic Benwood is a perfect introductory wreck dive. The MV Benwood was built in Sunderland, England in 1910. She was 360 feet long and 51 feet wide, displacing 4,000 tons. Her 1,800 horsepower steam engine propelled her through the water at about 9 knots or 10 miles per hour. In the spring of 1942, the Benwood left Tampa, Florida, bound for Norfolk, Virginia, with a load of phosphate rock. Because of the threat of German submarines known to infest Florida Keys waters, the Benwood was running dark with no lights visible. At 1:30 a.m. on April 9th, the crew of the Benwood spotted the Robert C. Tuttle, also running dark, bearing down full steam dead ahead, making a head-on collision with the Benwood inevitable. While the wreck was disastrous for the Benwood, the Robert C. Tuttle survived the collision with minor damage. As water poured through a gaping hole in the Benwood, a fire attracted the attention of a nearby German U-boat that quickly moved in for the kill. Lacking sufficient deck guns to defend herself, the crew abandoned ship. The captain of the Benwood skillfully backed her aground in 40 feet of water north of French Reef, saving the vessel for future salvage efforts. All but 2 crewmen reached the safety of the Robert C. Tuttle, which remained in the area to aid the stricken Benwood. As we glide over this 120-yard-long wreck in the late afternoon sunlight, I'm picking up a haunted feeling, especially knowing the story of the Benwood's violent demise. Last target of the day, the masts and winch are about a half a mile, 015 degrees north-northeast up the reef line in 25 feet of water. The winch appears to be of mid to late 1800s manufacture. 200 feet south of the iron mast is a Porter anchor, a design that was patented in 1838. Shipwreck Authority Major Chuck Hayes suspects that all of this wreckage is the remains of the Avondale, a three-masted Canadian sailing ship which displaced just over 1,300 tons. The Avondale went down in a violent storm on February 19, 1875, with a cargo of lumber. Again, this is only a theory. No conclusive evidence as to this ship's identity has ever been found here. It's time to head back to Port Largo and retrieve my boat. The Dive Odyssey continues. Tomorrow, we're moving about 7 miles up the highway to Garden Cove.